Hello, my name is Solome Tibabu. I'm the host of the Going Digital Behavioral Health Tech Conference, and I'm really excited to have Dr. Chris Wasden here, head of HappifyDTx. Dr. Wasden, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I lead the digital therapeutics business at Happify Health and have worked with Happify for about the last 5 years, 2 years as a consultant, and then 3 years as the head of the digital therapeutics business.
In fact, can you share a little bit more about what actually is the difference between Happify, Happify Health, HappifyDTx?
Sure. So when we were started about 8 years ago, we were started by two video game entrepreneurs that created Happify to take their science of engagement that they knew about through the video games and apply it to an area of health that they thought they could make a difference. And they chose mental health as that area of focus. So when we started, just to simplify things, the name of our company, Happify, was the same as the name of our product. And when you start a company and you think you're going to have just one product, then having the same name of the product and the name of the company just makes a lot of sense, right? You don't have to confuse everybody with what's the product versus what's the company. And we did that for many years. And then as we began to focus more on the healthcare sector, we began to realize that we would need to have a variety of products for different types of conditions that we would address and treat. And so the need for this greater breadth in the product portfolio and also the increased focus on true healthcare, not just direct-to-consumer products, meant that we needed to add health to our name so that people understood that Happify wasn't just about a direct-to-consumer experience, but employers, health plans, pharmaceutical company, health care organizations. And then we also needed to differentiate between the product and the future products that we were creating. And so from that future product perspective, we now have about 9 different products that we offer to our health plan and employer customers. And then I'm responsible for the products that we create for pharmaceutical clients. And there we have about a dozen different products that are in various stages of development there. And each one of these products then has its own name and branding associated with the product. And then we still have a direct consumer product, but it's actually, there's 2 direct consumer products. One is a Happify wellness product, and the other is this direct consumer COPA product, which is a disease journey specific application. And so our first instance is for psoriasis, and we have others that'll be launching this year.
Great, thanks so much. A lot of exciting things happening, and I'm going to ask you a bit more about that. But let's talk about, you mentioned pharma companies. So Happify enables pharma companies to create value beyond the pill.
Yeah.
You do that by providing digital complements and companions that improve efficacy to their drugs. If you could just explain, how does that work for a patient?
Yeah. So for a patient, let's look at a patient on any one of these expensive drugs that are out there for psoriasis or for multiple sclerosis or cancer or whatnot. So they're on a drug. The drug will have some sort of clinical benefit and will have generally some sort of side effects the patient's dealing with as well. And then for many of these conditions, they're chronic conditions. And so these patients will be on these products for maybe the rest of their life. Now, what happens to these patients is that concurrent and comorbid with their underlying disease, they also have anxiety and depression, and they can suffer from other symptoms that are related to anxiety and depression, such as fatigue or pain. So the drug has a very limited label, and it can only have on its label the things that the clinical trials show that it could achieve through those endpoints. However, with the digital therapy now, we have the ability to address, manage, and treat other symptoms beyond the symptoms of the pill. And sometimes those symptoms actually decrease the issue that the pill's dealing with. So for example, in the area of migraine, we not only can deal with anxiety and depression, but also sleep. And when you look at the 3 primary triggers for migraine, they're anxiety, depression, and sleep, right? So if we manage those more effectively, then patients have fewer migraines. Fewer migraine days is actually the endpoint of a migraine drug. So we can actually also decrease the endpoint of the drug that the drug's addressing as well. And so now when you think about a label expansion, okay, then it gets into these FDA related claims. And so what can you say about this? Well, if we are just a complement, not a combination, what that means is that we can be offered through a patient support program of a pharma company, and they can then offer it as a free service to their patients to help them address and manage the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and in this case, migraine. Okay. But it would not change the claims of the drug. It would just be claims around our product that they're offering as a free service, right? However, if we combine our product with their product, and we do this through a regulatory path called 505B and get that approved by the FDA, now the claims can be the claims of both the digital therapy and the drug. So when you think about drug plus, right, you're adding the claims of both, and then this becomes a new product with a new name and a new brand. And when a physician prescribes it, the physician's prescribing this new combined product as a single product. When you think about the strategic value of digital therapy for a pharma company, the greatest value is where they can significantly differentiate their drug versus everybody else's drug. They can deliver significantly greater value to the patient and the health system. They can make these broader claims, and they can provide the most important information that the payers want to receive. So what is it that payers want to know? They want to know, did somebody actually take the drug and use it? So they want adherence data. They want to know, did taking the drug actually improve the clinical endpoints that I'm paying for? I want evidence of that. And thirdly, they want evidence that by achieving those things, the patient had better well-being and ideally decreased medical costs. Well, when you think about a traditional drug without the digital therapy, there's no way to collect that information except through a clinical trial on a limited number of patients over a fixed amount of time. When you now add a digital therapy to the drug, you can actually collect that information in real time in perpetuity, which is real data, real evidence. It's not this fictional world that they live in called a clinical trial. It's actually real world where you're collecting this information. And so that information is more compelling to justify reimbursement. So now if you think about yourself as a pharmaceutical company, and you are maybe, let's assume you're a Me Too drug in the space, all right? So you're maybe the second or third line. You're not the first line that physicians are going to be prescribing. So you want a better competitive position with your drug versus the competing drug. So if you can combine your drug with the digital, now your claim set expands. As your claim set expands, you can now get placed higher in the formulary with the payers. You're providing data on the value to the payers around adherence, outcomes, clinical benefit, well-being, okay? And so now they're more willing to pay for it because you have data others don't have, okay? And so now you're highly differentiated, and you can actually get greater market share, right? Which is the end game, because the value that you can create over greater market share is the ultimate goal here. So that's the prize. The other use case we've seen is where you were the number one product and a new drug comes into the market. And so now you've lost your number one position. So can you actually regain that number one position by adding the digital therapy to it? So that's the promise, that's the opportunity. The pharmaceutical companies prior to COVID were not very focused on it because quite frankly, they were making a ton of money without it. And so why add digital that complicates my life in many ways if I can make just as much money without digital? Then what happened with COVID, several things happened. One is they found that doctors weren't in their offices, their sales reps couldn't get into offices. They needed to have more digital access to patients. They couldn't be dependent upon the doctor for access to the patients. They needed to find out how they could get access themselves. And so this opened up their minds to all things digital. And so now we have probably almost a half a dozen different combination discussions going on with pharma clients where they want to add our digital with their drug to have this combination for all of those value benefits that I mentioned.
So I have to ask more about COVID and what the impact has been. I know last year the FDA issued some guidance to help expand the availability of digital therapeutics. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's impacted Happify?
Sure. So COVID has, and we're not the only ones to say this, but has accelerated the adoption of digital within healthcare generally by at least 5, if not 10 years. So that everyone's beginning to look at ways to leverage digital so that you can deliver better, more real-time, more frequent care to patients. So this has impacted us with regards to the interest generally. With regards to the FDA, they issued this guidance in April of 2020 because they wanted to make sure that patients were getting access to products that could help them. Now, the reality is that there's very few companies that had products fully developed and ready to launch just because the FDA said they don't have to go through a clinical trial. And so it has taken some time for all companies, including ourselves, to take products that we currently had in development and advance them rapidly enough that we could actually get them available or make them available to patients during this COVID emergency authorization time period. And so we're preparing actually to launch a product soon that will be under that authorization, but it's taken time, right, to get it to the point where we're ready to launch it. You just couldn't turn it on April 1st.
Yes. So besides digital therapeutics, it sounds like Happify actually has a pretty comprehensive program for health plans and employers as well. Can you explain more?
Yeah, so Happify, as I mentioned earlier, started as a direct-to-consumer company. Then as we were going through the capital raising process, we met a venture capitalist who had recently retired from Optum, which is part of United Healthcare. And at Optum, he ran the largest behavioral health network in the United States. And when he saw what we were doing, he told us, I've been looking for 20 years for an organization that does what you do, and no one's been able to crack it. You guys are the first ones. Therefore, I want to invest in your business. And then we asked him to become our chairman. So now he's our chairman. As a result of that, we began this pivot, not completely away from direct consumer, because we find that our roots in direct consumer serve us very well in everything that we do. And I'll go into some of the reasons for that in just a minute. But we began to pivot away from direct consumer only and started to pivot towards the employers and the health plans. And so the health plan journey is a long one, right? You don't approach a health plan and say, have I got a product for you? And they say, great, we've been looking for it all our lives and we'll cover 20 million lives tomorrow, right? It's a journey where and everything in a health plan is under a year-long calendar schedule, right? Because nobody changes their health plan benefits except once a year. Right, so year 1 is going through an RFP. Year 2 is doing a pilot with a couple thousand patients. Year 3 is doing a pilot with a few thousand, employees with 1 or 2 customers. Year 4 is doing a larger program with maybe 1 million or 2 covered lives. Year 5 is where you actually start to make money. So you have to be in to this journey for 5 years before it's really paying off in a meaningful sort of way for you with a health plan. Employers move a little bit faster, but it's still on this kind of annual calendar. You only apply for your new benefits package as an employee once a year. And so they're all gearing up for the change in benefits for that annual change. And then it takes time to obviously get the patients recruited and onto your product. So we started out direct consumer, we moved into employer health plan, and then I showed up and helped for 2 years do some consulting with Happify to help them look at the digital therapeutic space as an opportunity with pharmaceutical companies and health plan or with health systems. And initially with the pharma companies, we wondered to what extent the pharma companies would see us as kind of a competitor, right? Because we're treating a disorder without a drug and they treat it with a drug. But what we've really focused on is saying, what is the common denominator with most people that have a chronic condition, it's anxiety and depression. Okay, so let's start with what's common across all of these diseases, and then see what we can add in addition to that to treat the physical symptoms as well as the behavioral symptoms of various diseases. And one of the first areas we focused on was multiple sclerosis. And so if you look at the journey we've had in multiple sclerosis, it's interesting to see how these various different skills come about. So the first thing a pharma client wants to know is, can you find patients I care about? Can you activate them on your app, which means can you get them to download the app and use it? Will they come back and use it again and again? So can you engage them for a significant amount of time? Can you gather data from them about not only their mental health, but some other related disease? And can you show clinical benefit or improvement with that patient? So now we take our direct consumer skill set and we say, okay, pharma client, we will find you thousands of patients that have the disease you care about. We will get them to download and use our app for several months so that they can receive the clinical benefit. We'll provide you every 2 weeks an updated report that shows how many patients we recruited, where they are in the process, how much we've moved the PHQ-9 or the GAD-7 measures for anxiety and depression. We'll show you how much we've improved their underlying MS condition as well in the areas of fatigue and pain. So after we go through that process, so we did this in MS where we recruited nearly 4,000 patients over the course of 2 months, and we gathered this information over 6 months. And so we went back to the pharma client and we showed them all the data we'd collected. And this is for a pharma client that only has about 30,000 patients, 40,000 patients on their drug. So we showed them data on almost 4,000 patients. This blows them away. How did you find 4,000 MS patients already in just a couple of months when it takes us years to find that many patients, right? So that's the value of our direct-to-consumer capabilities, that we can do what we call a proof of concept pilot, very quickly gather compelling data from our product that we've already manufactured that already is effective, right? So then what we do is we then show them that while we've been able to show immediate and impressive results with these patients that have MS, we can actually do even better if we configured our product for that disease. Because the patients oftentimes don't understand the connection between mental health and their underlying disease. And so we need to make those connections very clear to them, that they understand that doing this mental health therapy is actually going to help their fatigue or help their MS. We then have to contextualize all of our interventions so that they are appropriate for that disease. So for example, we have one of 6 skills that we help patients with, we call Revive. It's around sleep, diet, and exercise. Well, if you have MS, you could be all the way from being able to run a marathon today to being someone in a wheelchair. So we need to take into account that difference of ability and capability when we give interventions for people to do. So when we give them a yoga intervention, we need to know beforehand, does this need to be chair yoga where you're sitting down, or can it be standing yoga? And it's based upon the patient's capabilities. When we have our AI bot, we call Anna, when Anna gives you an intervention to do, she needs to know that when you are talking about the symptoms of your MS, and you talk about a flare-up or remission or things like that, she knows what that means. Because for our other products, they use different language, different terminology. And so she has to be trained for every single disease. So she understands what you're talking about and can catalog that in what we call the life graph, which is where she collects and stores all the information about you so she can then use it later on in therapeutic interventions, right? So we tailor it for that specific use case. And then we have another product line that we have called COPA, which is around creating community around specific diseases and helping you on your patient journey, because every patient's at a different point in their journey. And so they like to communicate with other patients that are perhaps more advanced in the journey to find out what's in store for them, or find out what sort of side effects they had with the drug, or what sort of drugs they thought performed best for them. And so with these communities, we have peer-to-peer support. We also inject clinical experts into these communities so that they can provide some information as well. And so what we focus on is that entire patient experience and journey, where sometimes the experience is intense with an acute therapy. Sometimes it's more maintenance dose with a therapy that goes on for a long period of time, but less levels of intensity. Sometimes it's around the patient journey and getting peer support and trying to find better therapeutic options. So that's our focus. And so we have this direct consumer with the employer health plan, the pharmaceutical, and the clinical, so that we can be there for you no matter where you are in your journey.
Thanks so much, Dr. Wasden. Super interesting. And can you talk a little bit about business models for these different customers, pharma, health plans, so on?
Sure. So every one of our different business lines has a different business model. So our direct consumer business line, which is our COPA patient journey business, is free to the consumer, and it is paid for by pharmaceutical and other companies that want to have access to a patient to educate them about various types of products. So it's more of an advertising model. Our employer health plan business model is predominantly a per patient per month, per member per month, sometimes a case rate type of revenue structure. For our digital therapeutics business, we have a number of different ways that those products are paid for. So the products offered by pharma companies through their patient support programs are free to the patient, paid for by the pharma client, where the pharma client pays for a configuration fee for us to configure the product to their specific disease. That normally takes us about 6 months to do the configuration of the product. And then we charge them an annual license to offer it to their patients. That license is based upon territory and size of the market and things like that. For the prescription digital therapies, those are products that are reimbursed by third-party payers. We've seen a real convergence around what that pricing is going to look like for most products, based upon what's going on in Germany with the DIGA program, as well as what's going on in the United States. You can look at about 15 or more different products, and you'll see a price range at the low end that's $250 per course of therapy, at the high end around $1,600, but the median and mode is around $700 to $800. Depending on the length of the therapy and the value and the HUR studies and things like that. So we call it $700 to $1,000 per course of therapy per patient. And then you have the prescription digital therapies. What's interesting there, we have about 6 of these products now that we're working on. And these are all for chronic diseases where the drug costs somewhere between $15,000 to $80,000 per year. And so if you look at what I just talked about with regards to the PDT pricing at $700 to $1,000, does it really make sense to try to negotiate an extra $1,000 on a $50,000 drug? No, it doesn't, right? So what the payers are saying is, if your new combination product, digital with the drug, is so much better than the alternative, you will win in the market by selling more volume. And you would have to sell, you'd have to sell 50 of a drug at $1,000 price increase to make the same amount of money as if you sold one additional prescription at $50,000. So the payers are saying, don't come nickel and dime me for an extra $1,000 on a drug, add the digital to it and win in the marketplace because you have the best solution out there. And so that's how those products are priced in the market, and how we expect them to be priced in the future. And then how the model then kind of rolls to us, where with a pharma partner, we will get some portion of the value that we create for them with the combination.
Great. So you just raised $73 million. What are you going to do with all of that?
Go to Disneyland. So we raised 73 million with the objective of this year alone doubling our headcount. So when I joined Happify 3 years ago, we had around 25 people in the United States as employees. We do all of our software development in Latvia and Montenegro. So we have a large software development organization there. But as far as the United States is concerned, we had about 220 people in the US. We will end this year with over 200 people. So in the last 3 years, we will have grown our US headcount by tenfold. Okay. So that's when you look at the amount of money that we've raised, it's really to increase our regulatory quality, sales, marketing, finance, accounting, operations across all of our business lines. And so our COPA business, which is our newest direct-to-consumer business, was launched last year in July. All right. So it focuses just on psoriasis so far. And since July, we've gotten 40,000 users on that offering on our platform. And we expect to have that over to 100,000 by the end of the year. And we plan to add 2 or 3 more disease conditions this year to the COPA business, right? So you see this exponential growth going on there. When I joined Happify 3 years ago, we had no pharma clients, okay? Now we have contracts with 7 of the top 20 pharma clients. And with that, we have multiple products with some of these pharma clients in development, right? So everything in the last 3 years has just grown exponentially. And with that, we just have to hire more people to keep up with what's going on. And the challenge with hiring people is that this is a very tight labor market, right? Where everyone's searching for the sort of talent that we're looking for. You've got billions and billions that have gone into the digital therapeutics market in the last couple of years. So everybody has a lot of money to recruit people. And so it is very important that you have a very compelling value proposition to employees because they have lots of options to find new employment. And so we are very much mission focused, mission driven as an organization, as well as living the principles around well-being and wellness and mental health that we provide as offerings, right? So we have that part of our value proposition as well. But it takes a lot of money to hire a lot of people.
Wow, super impressive. And speaking of comparing with all of the potential competition out there, and this is such a hot space right now, lots of people raising money, but can you talk a little bit about what is it that really differentiates Happify from everyone else?
Yeah, we have several things that we consider our superpower. So one of those is engagement. When you look at digital therapies that are tested through clinical trials, most of these, in fact, nearly all of them that you can point to, have been tested on a couple hundred patients, where the patients are compensated to be part of a study. So you have no idea, just because 500 patients used your product in a clinical trial, you have no idea if anybody in the real world would actually ever use your product. And what you find is that many of these companies are struggling because nobody will use their product in the wild, right? They'll use it in a trial, but not in the wild. With our direct consumer roots, we develop products that have been used by over 5 million people, okay? And because of that, we know what works. And we know what works at scale. And so we're able to take what we know that works and apply it so that if you look at our sustained engagement, after 2 months, 60% of people are still using our product. After a year, almost 50% are. And within 2 years, about 40% are. So we have these very high levels of sustained engagement that are significantly, like orders of magnitude higher than anybody else in the industry. So sustained engagement is one of our superpowers. The other superpower we have is our platform. I mentioned earlier that we can configure a product for a new disease from a standing start in 6 months. We did our MS product in 6 months. We did our RA product in 4 months. We're in the process of doing a migraine product that will take 6 months. So we can develop a new product on our platform for a disease that is a new area of focus for us within 6 months. Nobody else can come close to that. Okay. Why is that? Because we have a digital platform that has been built to scale infinitely and has on it already 70 different core therapeutic interventions that we then have modified to 3,000 different variants of those 70, right? So we have this huge catalog and portfolio of interventions that we can then modify and pick and choose for whatever disease intervention we want to go to. So this platform enables us to be a DTX factory and do it at a speed and a scale that nobody else in the industry can rival, okay? Then when you think about our direct consumer roots, right? I mentioned the example of doing the MS study, 4,000 patients in a couple months. Well, we've done this repeatedly. We just did a study with another pharma client in migraine. In less than 2 weeks, we recruited 5,000 migraine patients who downloaded our product and began to use it for 2 months, where we were able to gather data on their migraine disease, on their mental health, the improvement in their mental health over the course of the time that they were using our product. Nobody can do that. Nobody. All right. So that this ability to do things at scale and quickly, because we have all of this infrastructure already built in the platform. We have all of this education and learning around consumer behavior and consumer behavior change. These are things nobody else can do.
So this is already sounding a bit Jetson, really impressive. But I have to ask, where do you think the future of digital therapeutics are going?
So digital therapy will become a must-have associated with every drug within our lifetime for sure. But the question is, can we get there in 5 years? Probably not, but within 10 for sure. And that's because the payers are increasingly demanding the data that I talked about earlier. They demand to know whether or not the patients took the drug. They demand to know what the income or the outcomes were for the patient in using the drug. They demand to know patient well-being. They demand to know medical cost savings. You'll only be able to gather most of that data if you have a digital combination or a digital complement to the drug, because the drug will never gather that information, right? And most of that information isn't gathered anywhere else. Claims data is with regards to medical cost savings, so you could do analysis there, but the adherence data, the endpoint data, the well-being data, that's not captured regularly by any system anywhere. And so as payers demand more evidence to justify reimbursement, and as payers push pharma companies to value-based payments, then digital is a have to have. Otherwise, you can't compete in the market.
Excellent. Dr. Wasden, I have so many more questions I would love to ask. I can't believe we're already at time. Thank you so much for these great insights, and really exciting to hear all of the amazing work that Happify has been doing.
Thank you. Enjoyed being here.